In the autumn of 261 BCE, along the banks of the Daya River, the water did not run clear. It ran thick and crimson with the blood of over 100,000 men. Across the battered plains of Kalinga, the air was filled with the stench of decay, the shrieks of vultures, and the moans of the dying. Standing atop a war chariot, surveying the field of total devastation, was the most powerful ruler in Asia, Emperor Ashoka. He had won his war, had crushed his enemies. He had brought the last independent kingdom of the Indian subcontinent to its knees. Yet, as he looked upon the piles of severed limbs, the orphaned children weeping in the dust, and the tens of thousands dragged away into slavery, something inside the iron-hearted conqueror shattered. No king in ancient history had ever done what Ashoka did next. He did not build a monument to his victory. He did not order triumph parades in his golden capital. Instead, he picked up a chisel and commanded that his own utter horror and remorse be carved into solid rock for all eternity. How did a ruthless warlord, raised on the cold-blooded rules of imperial conquest, suddenly halt his armies at the height of his power? And how did his shocking crisis of conscience spark one of the greatest moral experiments in the history of human civilization? To understand the man who broke the Daya River, one must first understand the violent empire that created him. Half a century before Ashoka's reign, his grandfather, Chandragupta Maurya, had swept across northern India, driving out the commanders left behind by Alexander the Great and uniting vast territories under a single throne. This empire was not built on high-minded ideals. It was constructed using the cold, calculating handbook written by the royal chancellor Kautilya, known as the Arthashastra. The Arthashastra was a blueprint for absolute state power. It taught that a ruler must view all neighboring states as enemies, that morality had no place in politics, and that order was maintained through a vast network of spies, secret assassins, and ruthless force. Ashoka grew up in the shadow of this cold doctrine in the imperial capital of Pataliputra, a magnificent wooden metropolis stretching along the Ganges. He was not his father's favorite son. Emperor Bindusara favored his eldest son, Prince Susima, a handsome and refined royal heir. Ashoka, by contrast, was rough-skinned, fierce-tempered, and unpolished. Court legends later claimed his skin was so harsh that his father could barely stand to look at him. But what Ashoka lacked in royal charm, he made up for in military lethalness. Rebellions erupted in the distant northwestern frontier of Taxila. Bindusara sent the ungainly prince to crush them, expecting him to fail or perish. Ashoka did not fail. He marched his legions across mountains and rivers, pacified Taxila, not merely with brute force, but with sharp political cunning. Recognizing his dangerous capability, the court exiled him to the southern province of Ujjain as governor. Ujjain was a bustling trade crossroads, rich in wealth and political intrigue. There Ashoka governed with an iron fist, earning a reputation for terrifying efficiency. It was also in Ujjain that he met Devi, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. She gave him 2 children, Mahinda and Sangamita, and introduced him to the peaceful teachings of the Buddha. In his youth, philosophy was merely a background noise. Ashoka was a prince of the Mauryan machine, and his eyes were fixed on a far grander prize, the peacock throne. 273 BCE, Emperor Bindusara fell deathly ill in Pataliputra. The imperial court erupted into a nest of vipers. Prince Susima rushed toward the capital from the west to claim his birthright, but Ashoka was already moving. Backed by a brilliant and ruthless prime minister named Radhagupta, Ashoka entered the palace, seized the treasury, and secured the support of the imperial guard. What followed was a brutal 4-year war of succession within the royal house. Later Buddhist chroniclers wrote that Ashoka slaughtered 99 of his half-brothers, sparing only one to secure his crown. They called him Chandashoka, Ashoka, the ferocious. Modern history, however, tells a more nuanced story. Ashoka's own rock edicts, carved years later, mention his brothers and sisters living comfortably in royal households across the empire. Legends of a bloodbath were likely exaggerated by later monks to make his eventual spiritual transformation seem all the more miraculous. Yet the 4-year delay between his father's death and his formal coronation in 268 BCE leaves no doubt that blood was spilled and that Ashoka took the throne by force. Once crowned, Ashoka inherited an empire that spanned from the snow-capped Hindu Kush mountains down to the Deccan Plateau. But right in the middle of his eastern coastline lay an insufferable thorn in his side: the independent Republic of Kalinga. Kalinga was wealthy, proud, and strategically deadly. It controlled the trade routes connecting northern India to the southern ports and the sea lanes to Southeast Asia. More importantly, Kalinga maintained a formidable standing army, equipped with thousands of war elephants and disciplined infantry. The Mauryan mindset, a sovereign state sitting across imperial trade routes, was an unacceptable vulnerability. In 261 BCE, in the 8th year of his reign, Ashoka mobilized the full weight of the imperial army and marched east. Campaign in Kalinga was not a minor border skirmish. It was total war. The people of Kalinga fought for their independence with desperate ferocity, defending every village, every river crossing, and every hill. The Mauryan military machine was unstoppable. Imperial war elephants smashed through infantry formations, iron-tipped arrows rained down on defended towns, and Mauryan foot soldiers swept through the countryside, leaving scorched earth in their wake. Final battle along the Dhaya River turned into a meat grinder. When the dust settled, Kalinga was dead. According to Ashoka's own official record, recorded in Major Rock Edict XIII, 100,000 people were killed on the battlefield. 150,000 were captured and driven away into forced labor. Hundreds of thousands more died in the aftermath from starvation, disease, and the breakdown of society. In ancient warfare, kings stayed in their tents or celebrated victory in their pavilions. Ashoka rode his horse through the conquered territory. He saw the piles of bloated corpses rotting in the heat. He saw women wailing over mutilated bodies. He saw revered scholars, holy men, and innocent children dragged in chains. The cold logic of Kautilya's Arthashastra had promised that absolute victory brought absolute security. Instead, Ashoka felt a profound, suffocating terror. He realized that his imperial glory was built upon an ocean of human agony. The victory had not empowered him. It had broken him. What followed was a pivot unprecedented in the political history of the world. Ashoka did not abdicate his throne, nor did he disband his imperial army. Instead, he decided to turn the vast, centralized power of the Mauryan Empire toward a completely new mission: the moral transformation of society. He publicly renounced Dhammavijaya conquest by the sword and declared that from that day forward, the only true conquest was Dhammavijaya conquest by righteousness. Ashoka embraced the core principles of Buddhism, becoming a lay follower. He understood that a diverse empire of millions could not be ruled by a single monastic creed. Instead, he formulated a broad, universal code of civic ethics known as Dhamma. Dhamma was not a religion of dogmas or gods. It was a practical moral standard: respect for parents and teachers, kindness towards servants and slaves, truthfulness, religious tolerance, and absolute nonviolence toward all living creatures. Broadcast this vision across South Asia, Ashoka engineered the world's first mass communication network. He sent stonecutters across his realm to carve his messages onto massive granite cliff faces and soaring, polished sandstone pillars. These were not self-serving royal monuments. They were direct, conversational letters from the emperor to his subjects. He wrote in the local spoken languages, such as Prakrit, so that common people could understand them when read aloud. In the far western frontier, near modern-day Kandahar in Afghanistan, he carved edicts in Greek and Aramaic for the Greek settlers left behind by Alexander the Great. Ashoka created a new cadre of imperial officials called Dhamma, Mahamata's ministers of righteousness. His officers traveled throughout the provinces, not to collect taxes or arrest rebels, but to inspect the welfare of the people, prevent unjust imprisonment, ensure fair treatment of minorities, and audit local governors. Ashoka banned animal sacrifices, restricted hunting, opened free hospitals for both humans and animals, ordered the planting of shade trees along highways, and built rest houses and wells every few miles for weary travelers. He sent diplomatic ambassadors not to negotiate military alliances, but to spread his messages of peace to Hellenistic kings in Egypt, Syria, Macedonia, Cyrene, and Greece. For over 30 years, Ashoka maintained this extraordinary moral experiment. In 250 BCE, he convened the Third Buddhist Council in Pataliputra to resolve sectarian disputes, and sent his son Mahinda and daughter Sangamita to Sri Lanka, establishing the Buddhist tradition that survives to this day. But high ideals came at a heavy geopolitical price. Vast expenditure on public works, welfare, and donations to religious orders strained the imperial treasury. Meanwhile, by banning aggressive wars, Ashoka froze the military expansion that had long fueled the Mauryan economy. In his final years, the Grand Emperor faced growing resistance from his own ministers and royal family, who feared he was squandering state wealth. Records suggest that in his twilight days, his authority was curtailed by his court, leaving the once absolute monarch feeling isolated in his own palace. When Ashoka died in 232 BCE at the age of 72, the central pillars holding the empire together began to fracture. Without his immense personal authority and dynamic vision, his successors could not hold the vast territory together. Within 50 years of Ashoka's death, the Mauryan Empire collapsed, collapsing into regional kingdoms. Nearly 2,000 years, Ashoka's true story was swallowed by the jungle. His majestic pillars fell into disrepair, and the Brahmi script carved upon them became an unreadable mystery. To later generations, Ashoka survived only as a shadowy figure in Buddhist legends. It was not until 1837 that a British scholar named James Prinsep cracked the code of the Brahmi script, allowing the stone pillars to speak once more. When historians translated the inscriptions, they were stunned to discover that the voice echoing across 2 millennia was not that of a mythic saint, but of a real, vulnerable emperor who had dared to acknowledge his own atrocities and remake his world. When India gained its independence in 1947, the new republic chose as its official national emblem the Sarnath lion capital, the polished stone sculpture of 4 back-to-back lions that once stood atop one of Ashoka's pillars. At the center of the modern Indian flag sits the Ashoka Chakra, the 24-spoked wheel of righteousness and law. Ashoka's empire fell, but his radical idea that true power lies not in the sword, but in ethical responsibility, remains one of humanity's greatest legacies. What do you think? Can a nation ever truly be governed by moral power alone? Or is hard state power always inevitable? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into ancient history.